question to them individually. So, cool. All right. Well, let's begin, shall we? I just want to say a word of thanks for all of you who are joining us this afternoon, and we would love for you to join in the conversation and have dialogue with us. I know that there are 11 people who are participating right now. Some people may want to jump in as we go along. My role specifically in this webinar format is as the local mission leader for Resonate in Canada East. Hello, Beth. Good to have you with us. Beth is the regional leader for Canada East, and she's joining us as well for this webinar. So you might want to have some questions. You can also direct them to her, although I think that I'll try to field as many as I can. So as the local mission leader, basically what that means is that my job is to provide resources, have conversations, maybe to give some wisdom and insight, but you know what, I'm not that smart of a person. So I know a lot of people in our Eastern Canada denomination, and I know a lot of people that are much smarter than I am. And some of them are here in this web call, although Len doesn't usually fall into that category. Len and I, you know, I need to help out Len all the time. So just Len. So
yeah, just Len.
I can just pick on him because he's leaving soon. So, but I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I'm a practitioner. I'm a practitioner just like you, and but the thing that I can bring to this conversation is that I have some experience in starting some new things, and I hope to share that with you and encourage you along the way. At the end of this webinar, there will be some places for you to have possibly to get involved in something beyond this. So the purpose of this webinar is to give you a place to start, a place to answer some questions. We want to be able to maybe help you figure out where to get engaged in your community during this time and where to start. Oftentimes the most difficult thing is getting unstuck from where we are. And I'm going to share with you 3 steps that I've used many times before in order to take a step out into the community and do some mission for the gospel. And then also talk a little bit about how to approach your church council if that is a challenge for you in the process. So that's where we're going to go with this. And I'm going to stop occasionally along the way and allow you to ask questions. You can either send them to me in writing, or you can we can talk verbally about that. Yes, John sent me a question just a minute ago. Yes, we are recording. So if you would like a copy of this recording for some of your staff or for some of your missional leaders in your congregation, I'll be happy to share this recording with you when we get finished. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen here, and we're going to go on the way through it with this PowerPoint slides. All right, let's start with a word of prayer. Father in heaven, thank you for the opportunity to spend this time together, to talk together. Lord, would you give us wisdom? Help us each to see what it is you want us to see in this conversation for the next hour, and that you would give us insight and wisdom on the journey. I pray this in Jesus' name, amen. All right. So we are definitely living in some crazy times, right? I don't know about you, but my workload went up through the roof when this crisis started. And it was all about crisis management. And the first 3 weeks were probably the same for you as they were for me. It was trying to figure out, how do I do church online? How do I get our programs up and running again? And what in the world am I doing tomorrow? I mean, every day seemed like there was another thing that was just kind of thrown on top of us. And then we had to manage the grief and loss. 3 weeks into this, you're starting to realize that people are struggling struggling financially, they're struggling emotionally, and struggling spiritually through the whole journey that this is now taking all of our people through. And so if you were like me, you felt like you were balancing all kinds of things and trying to manage things that you've never managed before. And it came at a lot of a cost. And I'll share with you this very personally, that there's been 2 times in the last 8 weeks where I just hit a wall and I couldn't do anything. My emotional state was such that I couldn't do ministry. I stayed home. I pretty much binge watched Netflix or YouTube for a whole day, just trying to come out of that difficult spot where you kind of hit the wall. During this time, we've had to come up with some new routines. 3-4 weeks set in, and now all of a sudden we're like, okay, we've got to kick it into gear. We've got to figure out some new routines, figure out how do we do ministry now in the midst of all of this, and what are the stages and what are the places that we're going to be doing it in. And you're just thinking about your own ministry that's happening within your congregation, trying to get that up and running. So a lot of you have done what I've done, is we bought an account for Zoom, and it's just been Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting, trying to get people to do Bible studies online and so on and so forth. But for most of us, and this was the same for us, so I'm not putting myself in a separate category. It was exactly the same for us as probably for most of you. And if you're not one of these people, then good on you. But for us, existing outreach and mission just stopped, or the pause button got put on. And we just needed to manage the crisis we were in the crazy times that we're in. And now we're at this place where it is really important for us to take the next step and to address, how do we re-engage mission in our community given the pandemic and its restrictions. So I'd like to just say that I have a new medical condition. It's called Zoom fatigue, and the presenting issue is Zoom butt. It is a difficult thing to try and manage with your congregation. There is so much that's different about doing things by Zoom. And just as a kind of a tip for me, and from some of the reading that I've done, is that if you're going to do a meeting on Zoom, make sure that it's short. So I promise that by the end of this, we should be done in about an hour. But if you've got a 2-hour meeting that you would do in person, it's important that you cut it in half, because Zoom fatigue is a real thing, and we will struggle with that. And so will your people. All of our Sunday morning services have gone much shorter than they used to be. So here's our new reality. Church has left the building. And I think that that's a good thing. To be quite honest with you, it's going to force us to think very differently about a lot of things. Crisis will force us to adapt and to modify and to experiment. And crisis also pushes people into panic mode or withdrawal mode. And I think that great leaders are the ones who take advantage of an opportunity that comes along. I feel a little bit schizophrenic, and I imagine that you do too. There's this sense in me that says I must wait and pause, because God has naturally put this in front of us, that we have an opportunity to pray, that we have an opportunity to listen to God, we have an opportunity to just wait and pause like we've never had before. But then the other side of me has this burning desire to meet the needs, the spiritual needs of so many people in our community that are looking for and asking questions about God in a new and fresh way that we must, as leaders, capitalize upon. So I want to stop and pause and pray and ask God what he's saying. And yet I'm also asking him, how can I get involved in ministry and mission in this new reality we find ourselves in? This is not the new normal. I don't think that that's here yet, but we have a new reality that we're facing. And it's a reality where almost everyone that we want to reach is already online. And that is a reality that we must address. How are we doing mission in an online community with a group of people that are out there who are already online? I think that we've all had this new reality where we're moving as many ministries as possible to an online platform. At Discovery Church, all our Bible studies are back up and running online. Our kids ministry is back online. We started a prayer ministry that's online that we didn't have before. And so we're trying to build community in new ways in this environment where we can't get together. And I think that that's one of the key components that we have to keep thinking about with this missional connection in the COVID-19 era. We would need to be reaching people outside of our community. And what does that look like? Who are they? Where are they? A lot of them are online, and most of them are in our neighborhoods, in the places where we already reside. And so those two realities, I think, are going to be key in connecting. So what does that mission look like? What is that going to look like in this new reality? I have some thoughts. Please hear me that my thoughts are just the scratchings of my brain, and it may be a poor reflection of what the true realities are, and take from this what you wish. I've been thinking about this, and so these are some of my thoughts that I thought might help you think new thoughts yourself. So here we go. This is a quote from Alan Hirsch and Dave Ferguson from the book On the Verge. They say, practically, we could say this. On the one hand, the missional impulse describes the outward bound impulse that urges the church to reach beyond itself to its immediate neighbors, often across cultures and classes, and eventually to the whole world. And I love this part. It's how the gospel is sneezed into the world and grows exponentially like a virus. I thought that was a great quote given the reality that we find ourselves in right now. But the missional impulse is to go out, and it is to go beyond ourselves and our churches. I'm pleading with you that if you're in that place like I am, that we need to be stepping now outside of our own church walls or our own church environments or our own church structures and moving into our neighborhoods especially. And it's our responsibility as leaders to give a little instruction and encouragement or set up some structures in order to do that. But then they go on to say this. On the other hand, the incarnational impulse describes how the gospel goes deeply into a culture. As the seeds of the gospel fall on cultural soil, it takes root. Christianity develops in that culture in ways that make sense within that culture. Together, this is what we call the going out, going deep phenomenon. They kind of coined that phrase. But I like that. It's saying, look, we've got to go beyond ourselves as a church into a new reality, but not so far that we can't go deep enough and let the seeds of the gospel take root. And so I'm trying to advocate for you today is not to take a huge risk, but to take some risk to go outside of ourselves into our realities, in our neighborhoods, and in our culture, and sow seeds of the gospel and stay with it long enough for it to be cultivated, watered by the Spirit of God, and to see it take root. And I think that if that would be an outcome from this webinar today, then I would call this a success. So I'm going to stop for a minute and ask if you've got some questions. I'm going to stop my screen sharing here for a minute, and if you've got a question or you want to send it out or you want to just raise your hand in the chat function there, we can take a question so far. All right, don't be shy at any point. If you want to leave a question, you can do that, and we can take it as we go along, for sure. Here's one. So Paul asks, how do we go out? Well, Paul, I'm going to ask you to hold that question for a little while because we're going to get into a little bit of that in a few minutes. All right. So let's move forward into the next section here. Where do we start? And I think, Paul, we might get into some things here that that are going to be helpful for you as we move forward here. Len is just asking, curious, is most of this your own research or have you been working with others? So a lot of this is some of my own experiences, and it's been influenced by writings, as you can see, from Alan Hirsch and certainly from, we're going to be talking about that in a minute, but Hugh Halter. But a lot of it is my experience about going into the community and getting involved, and some trial and error. Like I told you before, I'm not the smartest knife in the drawer, so I try things, and if they don't work, we try something else. And eventually we get to a place where we got some things that worked. So where did we start? I think there are 3 steps, but before we do that, this is from Hugh Halter, and this is a little bit of my story and why I think that I have something to share, okay? So I started a church from scratch, and the idea was to go out into the culture of Bowmanville, the community, and to engage the culture in various different ways. And we did that through connecting with the downtown community, connecting with people through an Alpha course. We did random acts of kindness in the community, lots and lots and lots of those. We sponsored teams and so on and so forth. And out of that, what we did is we started forming a community. Not necessarily a spiritual community, but just a group of people that were gathering together of like mind. And usually they were in a group of people or in a place. And so we connected with a group of people connected to something, the downtown BIA. And we started gathering that group of people who wanted to gather. And mostly it was just fun, food, and kind of family kinds of things. And from that, I started the church, the congregation. So I began to put structures together and invited people to join us in starting the church. Now that was 15 years ago. And 15 years ago, that's the process that I went through. But today, I'm living in a church that's an established church. It's an official church in the denomination. And yes, we still have a lot of those impulses, but you're in churches that function a lot like my church does now. And my church functions more like an established church than a church plant. Yeah, we still have some DNA things that are carried over from being a church plant, but we've had this experience of trying a lot of different things. And out of those experiences, I want to share with you that I think that when you start from a structure, and that's where my reality is right now, one of the things that we do is starting from a structure, whether it's, a contemporary structure or it's a conservative one, whether it's, traditional worship or contemporary worship, whether it's conservative or progressive, whatever structure you're starting from, the process I think is still the same. That out of the structure, you form a community of people that are like-minded to be going out into the community. So you look at the people in your church and in your congregation, and you say, who are the individuals that have this desire to go out and do mission? And you gather those people around, and as a leader, you pour into them. Some of them are your staff. Some of them are your elders and deacons. Some of them are just lay leaders who are already involved in other things. And you tap them on the shoulder and say, we are going to form a community so that we can engage the culture. And I think that is the way in which our church functions now. And I think that that's a way that you can think about engaging your church in the process of moving into mission, where that incarnational community in the center becomes the place where people feel the authenticity of who you are, the vision for the movement, and they do it together as a group of people. And to be quite honest with you, it's something that you can do with another group of people and not have to do it on your own. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how do you form that community in just a minute. But I'd like to talk about mission during the lockdown. Here are the 3 steps that I think that if you're starting out that you can go through, which are pretty simple steps, but they require some courage and they require a little bit of strategy and thinking. The first one is pray with and pray for people. I don't think that I've ever in my ministry career been in a place where people are more open to being prayed for or prayer itself in the church than at any other time. I think the 9/11 kind of comes close. I remember there was a lot of people who were exploring spiritual things. But if we're going to be doing mission, a lot of people are open to being prayed for. And my experience is that of the hundreds of people that I have asked, hey, can I pray for you? Or can I pray with you? I can literally count on one hand the people who said no. And I didn't feel judged, and I didn't feel mocked during that time. They were respectful. They just said, no, thank you. I don't want to be prayed for. So a lot of people are open to being prayed for, but your church is also open to praying. And so what we've done here at Discovery Church is we've asked a whole group of people to pray for 10 people that don't go to church, that are in their neighborhoods, that they have regular contact with. And we ask them to put them on a list and pray for them every day. And I get them to put an alarm on their phone at 9:38 in the morning. If you're around me at 9:38 in the morning, my alarm goes off, and we're called to go to prayer for your 10. Prayer for your 10, I call it. And so that begins the process of saying, okay, I'm going to be constantly bringing into my mind those people that need to know more about Jesus, and praying that God would begin to work in their hearts. But secondly, I think one of the second steps that we can do in engaging mission in the lockdown is community service with gospel engagement. And I think the third thing, I'm going to talk a little bit more about these in a little bit more detail. The third thing is to ask good questions and to listen. I've been part of this group called Go Local through Resonate. And one of the exercises that they ask us to do in order to go locally into your neighborhood to see what God is up to is to spend time asking good questions and listening for what God might be saying in the neighborhood. So those are the three steps. A little bit of a breakdown in the first one: pray. Just pray. Call your church to prayer. At no other time have we been praying like we've been praying now at Discovery Church. We started a Facebook page, a private, members-only Facebook page, not our public one that we put out to the community, but a private one where we tell our congregation, put your prayer requests here. We have a prayer email. We've had it for years, and we would get 1 or 2 or 3 a month of prayer requests. As soon as we put this Facebook page together, we started getting 7, 8 prayer requests a day, especially in the first couple of weeks during the pandemic. Give your congregation more opportunities to pray, and then focus that prayer on the community. Oftentimes I'll put things on that Facebook page where I say, can you pray for the work that we're doing in mission? Cry out to God for help. We're asking the Lord of the harvest to send forth reapers into the harvest field. Ask God for help to point out the people that you need to gather into a group, to point out the places where you need to go, to give you wisdom and insight, and to put on your heart, God's heart, as you cry out to God for help. And then, especially if you're praying for people in the community, make sure that you take a minute and pray in the name of Jesus. Don't be too bland in your prayers. Make sure that they're clearly directed towards in Jesus' name. The second thing that I just want to break down is this community aspect. Right? Finding places to connect. Say yes to opportunities when they come along. If it's not going to break the bank, if it's not going to require you to restructure, if it's only going to take time and energy, say yes to any opportunity that comes along, because it may be that God is inviting you into a place that you haven't even thought about, and let it be an experiment. I got a call from Pastor Elizabeth from Strathaven Long-Term Care. She was saying that the administration was worried that they wouldn't have enough gowns for the patients and the nursing staff to wear because of the rate of laundry in the facility. They had enough masks, but they didn't have enough gowns to wear because the laundry was happening so fast every day. So she put out a call to the churches to sew gowns. Well, I don't know how to sew. So I just called a couple of people in our church community who I knew had friends who were sewers. And within 2 weeks, we had 44 gowns that went to the long-term care facility. Say yes to opportunities, because it's now given us an opportunity to do additional things. This Sunday, we're going to be doing an outdoor worship service for the Strathaven community. The residents will be inside. The team will be outside in the parking lot. They'll open the windows and we'll sing some old hymns and have one of our local visitors to the Strathaven home from our church, one of our elders, say a brief message and be an encouragement to that community. Be prepared to help people financially. I know that many of you have very active deacons ministries, but what is it that people are going to be needing outside of your community that you can already be prepared for financially to help out with? Engaging in mission is really a lot about helping the poor, helping the needy, helping those who are widows and orphans. And in our day and age, a lot of that can be done in a socially distant way through some financial means. We have gift cards from our local Christian school, which helps support them, but and also it's the way that we help people during these times financially. But then there are moments where people are saying, look, I'm not going to be able to get rent. I don't qualify for this and that because of this or that or the other thing. And we're able now with a fund that's $5,000 strong to just put money down for people in those places, not handing them the money, but getting it to the right places. Be prepared to help people financially. And then as far as community connections go, train your people. That's your responsibility as leaders. I can't say this more clearly. Your responsibility is to train your people in how to do these kinds of things. And that's probably the most scary part of this whole webinar, is that you have a responsibility to do some training, take people under your wing, model this behavior, and walk people through a process. And I think that if you stick with these three things simply, that you can encourage people through work that you do in your own neighborhood, doing it together with your people, giving them some biblical instruction and prayer. You can lead them through a prayer time, and you can lead them through stepping into these opportunities to participate. But don't do it yourself. Make sure that you bring somebody along with you. Don't do it on your own. Get your people to do it with you, or do it for you, or encourage them to do it on their own. And I think the last thing, the step 3 mission during the lockdown, is to ask and listen. It is so important that we don't assume what our community needs. Ask the questions, is there ways that I can help you through this time? Whether that's an organization or an institution or an individual. How can I help you? I don't want to assume what you need. We're going to ask you what you need. Actually, as a one-on-one thing with my neighbors, I go through my neighborhood every week. I knock on about 10 doors, and this is the question that I ask. How can I help you during this time? And it just starts the conversation in a very healthy way, where I'm listening, I'm hearing their stories, I'm listening to their hearts, and real intimacy then begins to take shape. This week we handed out begonias to the people in our neighborhood. My wife made a little card with her own handwriting, and she went door to door delivering these. And the question we ask each time is there any way that we can help you? Is there anything that we can do? We often have the time of prayer with people too. My neighbors across the street, their daughter was going through some chemo, their granddaughter probably going through some chemo. We had a chance to pray for them and to help out the neighbors as we go around. But this is what often happens, I find. When you ask, how can I help? When you listen long enough, you listen to people's hearts, you listen to the stories, they might turn around and ask you to share something. And that is a Holy Spirit moment. That is a moment where God is going to use you to step out missionally in your neighborhood. It could be just as simple as one-on-one, but it's most important in our institutional conversations, our conversations with organizations, businesses, or so on and so forth, in helping to ask how we can serve. And from that act of service, they turn around and invite us to share how things are going for us. And those are the moments where God uses so powerfully to open up the dialogue for spiritual things. All right, I'm going to stop here again. I'm going to give you a chance to ask some more questions. I think that we can do this verbally as well. I don't think that you have to do it, but you may want to raise your hand and I'll call you out and you can just ask the question.
I don't know if your microphone is muted, Martin, but I see your lips moving, but I don't hear any sound. According, yeah, it says you're muted on your screen.
Okay, how's that?
That's good.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I mean, there's just such a, in some ways, just a very clear, simple instruction. A number of things stood out for me. One of them was, and maybe you can comment on it, maybe others want to comment on it. Under community service, your first thing you said was just say yes. I was thinking that movie, Yes Man, where Jim Carrey basically, anytime anybody asked him to do something, he would just say yes. And I think, yeah, when God calls, a lot of times we're just saying no. And in some ways, yeah, we don't want to feel guilty about that now because we are feeling overwhelmed. So how do you deal with the question of you want to be available, but we're also probably retreating just along with everybody else. So I just maybe at least want to name the tension at least, because I think it's a good call, right? If you're not even willing to say yes, then of course nothing's going to happen.
I always feel the tension between waiting for whatever it is that God is making us wait for in this time, right? I mean, there's a natural sense in my heart that not only am I supposed to wait to hear from God, but I'm also supposed to act upon what God might be saying. And there are times when I feel like I need to pull away and pray, and then there are times when I have to get up and act. But my thoughts behind that is that very rarely do we get people who actually approach us to ask for help with something. But if someone comes along and it's not going to break the bank, it's not going to cost a huge amount of money. If it's really just about, facilitating and helping, I think the easy answer is to say yes. I think there may come a time when you're overwhelmed with requests, and that may be more of a vision conversation than anything. But I've only received 2 requests for help in 8 weeks. And both times I just, oh my goodness, this is my opportunity to say yes to something, because I'm just stuck not knowing what to do to begin with. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Anyone else have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I guess, and personally, in my context, here in Halifax, I'm trying to sort out, I guess, there's no shortage of things I could be doing to help people, but what I'm trying to do, and I'd love to hear from anyone who's also dealing with this tension, is I think just more thought around how do I not just help people, but actually support them and empower them and help them be an agent of the Holy Spirit instead of just being reliant on the Holy Spirit within me. So that's one thing I've been working through, is not to create dependency in this time, but to be supporting people in their own empowerment of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. Craig, you had your hand up. If you want to, feel free to share your thought.
Yeah, it's not a thought, it's more a question. I would just wondered if you could say a bit more about, I guess, number one, identifying people in your congregation that you think are primed and ready to be discipled in this way. And the other is balancing sort of, do you treat this as a one-on-one or one-on-3 discipleship endeavor versus a pulpit congregation-wide endeavor, and how you balance some of those ways of going about training the congregation?
Yep. So I made some mistakes along the way, and I'll share with you some of those mistakes first, because I think that'll help. Because if you're like me, at least you can learn from my mistakes. my big mistake in this process was trying to do it one-on-one with as many people as possible. And the reality is that I cannot sustain that amount of time. So I had 4 or 5 people that I was meeting with, trying to disciple them in this kind of missional endeavor, getting them to be involved in some things. And eventually what I found was that the best rhythm for me was to get 6 to 8 people together and go through a bi-weekly routine of leading them through missional engagement. And it would be a process of action and reflection. So we would get together, we would learn something, I would give them an assignment, we get back together again afterwards, and then we would reflect on the assignment and then add new material and continue to do that process. So that action, reflection, seeing where God was at work during that week, glorifying God in the midst of the process. But how do you choose those people? Well, what I'm looking for in a person who's going to be engaged in the mission is somebody who is already engaged in mission, and they may not even be thinking about it. People who are volunteering in community agencies, people who are asking the question. They have this holy discontent, but they don't know what to do about it yet. There are people in your church who are already probably leading something that is externally focused, but not actually very externally focused. So for things like cadets ministry and GEMS, and so they may be able to move towards something that's more externally focused. So I'm looking for leaders of 10s, people who can lead 10s, a group of 10 or so. I'm looking for someone who has some latent or some leadership experience. And I'm looking for people who are already involved in something in their community. They're volunteering at Bibles for Missions. They're volunteering at the Red Cross. They're doing mission without doing mission. They're already involved in some things. So those are some of the things that I'm looking for. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this as we move forward as well, because I think it's really important to put a framework in your head for who are the people that you're looking for. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about that as well, Craig. Let's see. Hey, Michael.
Yeah, I was starting to write a question and my hand slipped and I said, "Hey, Martin," and I just pressed enter. Just being very social, that's all. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about this whole COVID-19 situation with the church. I find it hard because you're not easily as connected with the people. You don't see them face to face. It's a lot like Paul. You're writing letters or from a distance. So you don't really know what people's reactions are. And one of the things I've been hearing from you in terms of the missional side of it is that, you're taking initiatives personally. You're going out, you're giving flowers, you're knocking on doors, you're receiving some requests from people within your own connections to make and things like that. And then you're just immediately going and tapping on people's shoulders and saying, "Hey, can you do this?" I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, where do we put energy in terms of the personal versus the institutional? Because, are you sending out requests to the church and saying, "Hey, this is something I've done, here's to learn from it, maybe you can do that too"? Are you tapping the shoulders of the deacons and saying, "Hey, can you call the institutions in your community?" Just uncertain about that. I know I've been having some conversation with people, and there's a wide range of people who are either busier or not busier, who feel more or less comfortable going outside of their own doors. I just find it hard to kind of get people together. And so I'm wondering whether you just start personally and just, pick a few people, or, try to involve more people in the process.
Yeah, so I would say that it's both. So there has to be a structural approach to this as well as a personal approach. You've got to lead by example. And that means you getting out and doing some of this stuff on your own. And it's your stories that are going to be most helpful in communicating the urgency of the mission to your congregation. So I tell these stories all the time when I'm preaching, when I'm sending out devotionals and those kinds of things, because I need people to hear that I am living out the mission of God myself. But it's really, really important to then think structurally for your congregation, or with a group of leaders in your congregation, to say, how can we actually provide a structure for people to get involved in that? Let's face it, most people need an outline. If you're like me, you need an outline in order to get something done. That's why 5 simple steps for this or 2 simple steps for that is so, it draws your attention, because we all need some kind of structure in order to move forward. And if there's confusion or if there's uncertainty, people don't act. And so that's been my experience. So what we've done is we've said, okay, well, let's set up some simple systems so that people can get involved in being a blessing. So we do something called Take It to the Streets, which is basically, we're supposed to do it on a Sunday morning where everybody who comes to church on Sunday goes out in the community. Well, we've retasked that, restructured it for a socially distant environment where we're saying there are still ways to be a blessing to our community. We can go door to door, wipe the doorbell with a sanitary hand wash, and wear gloves, wear a mask, go talk to your neighbors, get involved in some of those things where you can do things door to door. And so we give them a structure. Here's what you can do this way. You can make some things, bake some things. You can, we'll facilitate the, make cards. You can't get them into the long-term care facilities or the hospitals because they won't take them. Okay, well then let's scan them on the computer and then send them digitally so that they can print them from inside the facility for that group of people. Some churches have been going around the neighborhood with a little card that says, hey, I'm your neighbor. Here's my name and number. Is there any way that I can help you? Can I do? And then there's a list of things that they can check off. Can I pick something up for you at the store? Can I, so then we send this little document out to all our people and say, here's a little card that you can use to go into your neighborhood. So it does take both of those things to be able to go together. Model it yourself, but give people structures in order to work it out. All right, I got one more hand up. Where are we? Dale.
Yeah. Hi, Martin. Thanks. I'm sorry. A lot of the questions so far have been really practical in nature, and I'm really thankful for that. And I was hoping that my question was at the beginning because it's more conceptual.
Okay.
But if I take you back to your slide about starting with structure, and the very last slide you put up on that was a picture where the box of incarnational living bordered and covered the forming community. So a picture says 1,000 words to me, and I look at that and I say, oh, it sounds like we have to learn how to live incarnationally first within our own church community before we engage the culture. And I just wondered if you could speak to that. Is that just a misperception in my mind, or maybe there's an elaboration there that's greater? I just need that kind of be clear so the rest of this can be then unfuzzed.
Yeah. So I think there's an invitational component in that middle space. We invite people from the structure into a community, and so then now I'm gathering a group of people and I'm living out incarnationally this missional activity, and I'm asking people to join me on that journey as we go and engage community. But then once we engage community, you're inviting people back into that incarnational community before you invite them back to a structure, because they want to know that you're authentic, they want to know that you're real, and this group of people has a bond already that you can invite someone into, that there's room for them. So I think it's a both ways of that middle place is the space that bridges the engaging the culture and the structure. And I really feel that middle space is where incarnational community happens. So it's an invitation from the structure to the incarnational community, but it's also an invitation from the culture into the incarnational community.
So would I understand that it's really more the relational bridge between the two, between the
Absolutely.
culture and the structure? Yeah. And it's really
absolutely.
all around relationships.
Yeah, I think that we've moved away from just come and join us and, be part of us, and then you'll belong to all evangelism and outreach is about relationship building. So.
Okay. Thanks for that.
All right, I'm going to go back into sharing my screen again. And there's a few more things that I wanted to share with you. So how do you approach your church council? So you've got an idea in your head. You're thinking, okay, if I'm going to do this, am I going to get resistance from my church council? Or how do I set up the structure in order to move forward? Because both of those things are really important when it comes to how your church is designed and how they will allow you or in participate with you in moving forward. So one of the things that I want you to look at, and many of you probably seen this before a dozen times, and maybe this is new for some of you, is that this is called the diffusion of innovation. And the intention of this diagram is to help us understand how our churches are made up. And I think that as pastors, we make an assumption, sorry, I'm going to go back. We make an assumption about what we are called to do in our congregations that I think is faulty. And maybe some of you have made this assumption as well. What we tend to do is we tend to think that we have to convince the entire group of people that an idea is good before we go ahead with the idea. If there are innovators in the room, they're the people who say, yeah, I like that idea, I'm gonna do that. And then the early adopters say, well, if you're gonna lead it, then I'm gonna join you. The early majority says, well, you guys try it out for a while, and if it looks like it's gonna work, then I'll be involved. The late majority says, well, I'll only do it if everybody else is going to do it. And the laggards always say, yeah, but here's this problem and that problem and this problem and this problem. And then they never get involved anyway. I think we make a mistake by believing that we have to convince all of those groups of people about an idea, and they're represented in your church council as well, but we have to convince all of them that this idea is a good idea. I'm suggesting to you that you don't need to convince all of those people. The group that you need to convince is this group. And that group of people is what Malcolm Gladwell calls the tipping point. It's 15 to 18% of your congregation. It's people who are looking for ways to do something new. There's the early adopters who are saying, you know, I wish our church did this or that, but they never actually do it because no one's leading it. So if you've had that conversation with somebody, they come to you and they've got an idea, they want to do something, but they don't actually do it. They're asking you to lead it. How many of you got people like that in your church? They come to me every Sunday with an idea, but they never do anything because there isn't someone to lead it. Those are the groups of people that you're looking for in moving towards engaging the mission field in your congregation. You're looking for that group of people who are saying, I'm looking for something to step outside of this church walls, be engaged in our community. And I wouldn't do it myself necessarily, but if you led it, I'd be willing to come along with you. So when you approach your church council, don't come with the assumption that you've got to convince the entire congregation of a good idea. Just come with the assumption in your head that I just need to find 8 to 10 people in my group of, in my congregation who have a like mind that we're going to do mission together, and approach your church council with that framework. So you begin the conversation by saying, I'm going to try an experiment. Oh, I got to get rid of this here for a second. Hang on a second. Clear all the annotating. All right. There it is. When you approach your church council, get permission to experiment with something, saying, look, we're not going to take the whole church through a new program. We're not going to, it's not going to cost us thousands of dollars. The risk isn't very high, although it is more risky than what we're currently doing. You go to your church council and say, okay, I'm going to try an experiment, and I'm asking you for a trial period to go ahead and do something like this, to step out with a group of people that I want to take on this process to engage the mission field, even in the pandemic kind of time frame, that we're going to pray together. We're going to listen to the community. We're going to go through the process of saying yes to some things when they come along, and then try some experiments on the journey. And that, in my experience, has worked really well in, first of all, in helping your church council manage risk. Secondly, it takes all the laggards and the late majority people out of the equation. It Doesn't mean that they won't be part of the equation later on if things work, but it brings the kind of people into the process that you're looking for to start something new. So back when Paul was saying at the early part, how do we go forward and who are we looking for in this process, Craig? There's that group of people. You're looking for somebody who said, I got a great idea, or I'd love to do something different. I don't know what. Maybe they're not vocalizing it, so you're looking for those other characteristics. Are they leaders? Are they already involved in mission in the community in something as a volunteer capacity? But get permission to experiment and then ask for a trial period. I think that is probably the best way to go about trying something new. What that eventually does is gives you permission to try things, and when they are successful, then you can move forward and broaden the scope for your church. Then you can ask for a bigger financial investment. Then you can take a little bit greater of a risk because you've got a pattern under your belt. But if it doesn't work, you've not risked the whole ministry. You've not put people in jeopardy as far as volunteers go. You can retask them to other places. And it's low enough risk that you can step back from it and leave it and then maybe even try something else. I'm going to stop here again and ask you if you've got any questions.
Martin?
Yeah, Len.
So I have some very interesting reactions to your graph. I've seen it before.
Yep.
And I'm just afraid that anything I say can and will be used against me. But I'm going to try anyway. What happens if you have a congregation that feels like it needs to have 100% consensus before it can make any kind of decision?
Yeah. Yeah. And
All you need is one person to say no, and then everybody else is afraid.
Yeah, that's where the trial period and the experimentation comes in when you're approaching your council. And if that doesn't work, boy, I don't know, Len. It might be that you'd have to step out of the structure and just personally model that behavior and then take somebody under your wing and mentor them. If the structure that you're in doesn't allow you to experiment and try new things, I think that the only thing you're left with is modeling it yourself and taking someone along from the congregation that you can model it with. Sam, you've got a question.
I guess just in line with that question, like, I find that not everything gets passed. And this happened in Acts too, right? Like, people were going out, finding these Gentiles, and the Holy Spirit's falling on them and falling on sexually unclean, Ethiopians. And, what do you do with that? And I've just seen sometimes, when you just support people who are engaging in the Spirit in those places in the world, the evidence speaks for itself often. Often you need to see something happen kind of on the margin, on the fringe, and then spotlighting it. And then people are like, okay, how do I do that? That's what I've seen personally in a couple congregations when things don't get approved.
Yeah, I think that's wise, Sam. Just if Len, if you can't get the congregation to move in that direction, then you're a cheerleader for those people who are taking the initiative themselves, right? And asking the question, how can I help you in the process? It may not be changing the dynamic of the church, but certainly the personal connection between the two of you and the mentoring relationship that's possible. So, all right, I'm going to go back. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Martin, I just wanted to add to that, just the promotion of the permission to fail.
Yeah.
Just the ability to say, hey, this may not work, but we're going to try it, and we might fail, but we're going to learn from what we did. Yeah. And it just invokes this invitation to say, well, yeah, let's try that experiment then. But the idea that we're permitted to fail is enlightening.
Yes. And I think that what that does too is it creates a culture within your congregation. If you are going to continue to experiment with things, that you have a culture of experimentation, but also a culture of grace in the failure as well, right? So you continually move forward, and you've got to have some successes, of course, but if something doesn't work out, people get used to the idea that we experiment and we do things here. We try new things.
Yeah.
All right, a little back to our presentation. So what next? It's time to act. It's time to do something. Maybe you've got an idea, maybe you haven't, maybe you're just sitting here thinking, okay, I'm just gonna listen and maybe something will pop out of this. But some of you probably came to this conversation with an idea already. You're thinking, okay, what if I was to do this in my church community? Or you've dreamt about it, but you've never taken the next step. What are you going to do? Well, I said this earlier, and I think Dale was mentioning this earlier. I think all evangelism and outreach is about community and discipleship. And I would like to suggest a possible activity for those of you who don't know what to do right now. So what about an online community of some sort? What would it be like if you were to connect with, as a pastor or as a church, with a community of people that you could access online that are not part of your church currently? And what might that look like? That connection could be running an Alpha course. Many of you know the blessings of Alpha, but Alpha really works well in an online environment. We're running Alpha right now, and just having some really great success connecting with people that we would have never connected with. Done a $50 worth of advertising on Facebook, and we've got a Zoom room full of people that are not regular churchgoers. Just fantastic. The Alpha works really well. You don't do a meal, you just watch the video, have the conversation, you're done in an hour and 10 minutes. It works really, really well. I just want to encourage you to consider that. But what about Grief Share? That also would work really well because it's video-based and it's community also focused. You could advertise it to a group of community. What about a support group? Just where someone is saying, look, I just want, if you want to get together on a regular basis. What about neighborhood connections, an online community? You've got 5 people in your neighborhood and you say, here's my email address. I'm going to send you send me an email and I'll send you a link to a Zoom call, and we'll just, because we're neighbors and we can't be together, why not get together in an online community of some sort? Because that online community is where a lot of people are at. Sorry, there's somebody wants to jump in. All right. So I just want to encourage you to think about that everyone that you want to reach, or just about everybody that you want to reach, is already online. Where are they hanging out? What about doing a Netflix watch party with a group of people? You can do that with Netflix now. You can do a watch party. You can do Facebook groups where you're gathering together for community groups and inviting people to join different things. And I think that online community could lead to an in-person community when this pandemic restrictions are lifted. And that's that incarnational community that we're talking about earlier that Dale was trying to bring some clarity to. And eventually that might lead to bringing people to church or participating in programs. But don't forget that this online environment that we have in front of us now is an extraordinary opportunity to connect with people that are not normally going to show up on a Sunday. How are you connecting with those people who are attending your services online, and how are you going to engage them in-person community once this is over with? Have you thought about that journey, right? How do you stay connected with them, find out who they are, correspond with them, engage with them somehow in an online community, or invite them into another online community, and so that you can have those in-person communities later on. This is a wonderful opportunity that you can explore. What do I do next? Well, first thing is to gather a group of people. Who are those people in your church that you think, you know what, if I did this with 3, 4, maybe 5 people, that they are kind of thinking about mission, or I could really see them getting involved in this, tap them on the shoulder, invite them to gather together with you, and then cast a vision for stepping out in the community. Maybe you've got an idea that you're going to present to them, and you gather that group of people around that idea, or you just gather that group of people and together you begin the process of praying for Holy Spirit guidance, praying for God to open your eyes to what might be happening in their lives and in your life. And then together you kind of respond. You say, okay, you know what? We're going to listen now for what that group of people is saying. We're going to find out where they are, or go to that place where they are, or have a conversation with that group of people. I'm chaplain at the fire department, so sometimes I'm going to be calling the fire hall and saying, hey, Chief Gord, what is it that you need? How can I be praying for you? What are the things that we can do to help? And then gathering that group around that vision, connecting with that. And then try and experiment. Make sure that you tell your congregation, this is an experiment. It might work, it might not work. It's not going to cost us a lot of money. It's not going to, restructure our organization. But this group of people, we're going to try this experiment. And make sure that you tell your elders or your council what you're doing. Maybe share it with the congregation when things are going well. But experiment, try something new, and see where God might be leading you next. All right, I'm going to skip this one here and just kind of go through this because I want to be fair with my time. It's 3 minutes after 3. Where do I go to get help? You can connect with Beth Fellinger, our regional Canada East mission leader, or you can connect with myself. My number here is on the screen. And you could do a couple of things. I could give you a call. We could talk through some ideas just to be a sounding board. Here again, I'm not the expert. You guys are often a lot smarter than me with a lot of different things. I think that just having conversations and connections with people who are like-minded will generate ideas and help walk through a process. And then if you're interested in a coaching cohort of some sort, where this would be a short-term project, this is not a long-term thing. This is like 3 months where myself and you and a couple of other people will get together every other week and walk through those 3 steps that I shared with you earlier. How do we engage in prayer? Where do we say yes in the community? And then stepping into action and doing something, finding that group of people. So that's my presentation for today. I want to thank you for being part of all of this, and I hope that if you need help or want to be engaged further, that you reach out to me. Any questions? Now I realize that some of you need to jump out, but if you have a question, feel free to share it. Just unmute yourself. You can ask the question or you can write it down. I can get the recording of this session very soon to you. Yes, I'll get a link from Zoom pretty quickly, and I'll send the link off to you so that you can download the recording of this. You're welcome, Len. I will send you the PowerPoint slides if you like, but they should be in the recording. So they'll be in the shared section of the recording as well. All right, everyone. Thanks for participating. I hope that this has been helpful. Please call me and connect if you would like to walk together down a path. Be happy to do that, and I'd love to encourage missional connection in our community. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Martin.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Martin.